Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to take a look at several different books that I don't think that you should buy right now. And I'm going to outline my rationale for it. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to decide for yourself whether this is good advice or not. Let's get to the list. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples. And like the previous videos that have been done, we're going to look at a wide range of examples and also rationales for why these may not be books that people want to pick up. And the very first book that we're going to look at is one that I honestly want to buy. And this is just a great book. This is Batman issue number 171, the first Silver Age appearance of the Riddler. And we're actually going to look at three different grades for this book. We're going to look at a 6.5, a 6.0, and also a 4.0. And there is a reason for that. So let's go ahead and look at the 6.5 first. And what we can see here as we pull up the data is that you can see the most recent sale in June of this year was $16.95. So basically $1,700 was the most recent sale. And then you back up and find the one. We typically go back to January, but there is no January sale of 2022. So we're actually going to go to December of 2021. And that sales price was $1528.23. So you're basically looking at an increase for this specific book of about $167 between December and June of this year. You can kind of see it play out over here. The 1 year for this book was $1,284. It went up to around $1,700 and is essentially maintaining its course at about $1,700. So that was the 6.5. So let's back up and take a look at the 6.0. Again, another important book. There's about 100 of these on the census and about 37 sales overall. And you see something a little bit different for this one. When you look at that trend line, you can see as we back up here and look at January, in January of this year, the book was selling for roughly $1,062 to be specific. And then as we look out to June of this year, you can see that the value of this book has dropped to about $840, which is roughly a $222 delta between the two. And again, as you look at the 1 year, you can see it's $967, fell to $825, and then came back up at about $840 over the last 30 days or so. So let's back up, and we just received an error message. Let's see if that goes away. That has not happened before. Let's see if we can find that book again. Batman 171. Glitches do happen, people. All right, so let's go back in there. And I think we were headed to look at the 4.0 of this book. 127 on the census, 41 sales for the 4.0. And we look at this one. This one looks very similar to the 6.5. Well, it looks a little more like that one. In January of 2022, we can see that this 4.0 sold for roughly $1,000. And as of June, the price has gone down to about $800. That is about a $200 delta between the two. You can see the 1 year average sitting at about $750. The value went up at the 90-day to about $784 on average, and then has increased even more to $800. Now, there is a reason why I selected specifically those three books, the 6.5, the 6.0, and the 4.0. And what you'll probably notice here, let me make this a little bit bigger. What you may notice in this right-hand column, as I go down the list, you can see that there is not a whole lot of data there for the 30-day average. In fact, when you go down the list, basically what you see is that it's only the 6.5, the 6.0, and the 4.0 that actually have books that have sold recently of this specific book. And that's what makes it a little hard to get a real feel for what's happening with this book. There is not a lot of them out there. There are not a lot of copies of this book. In fact, there are roughly 1,300 copies of this first Silver Age appearance of the Riddler. And there are few copies. There are also few sales. And then there's just less of this to go around. So it makes it a little difficult. But part of the reason why I say that this is a book that should not be picked up is that I feel like the value of this book is somewhat inflated because the Riddler appeared in the Batman movie. I feel like the price has been pushed up just a little bit as a result of that appearance. Now, we don't know whether the Riddler is going to reappear. If you've seen the Batman, there is a chance that the Riddler could come back. The DC did something different than the MCU in that they did not kill the character off. So they could always bring the character back, and potentially Riddler will make an appearance. But my feeling is that even though we are in the rear view mirror of that movie, the value of this book has not come down. Now, there's a chance that it won't come down. And I say that because, again, when you look at how many copies are out there, there's only 1,300 copies, not a whole lot of sales. It's one of those books that if you see it, maybe people feel compelled to pick it up. I will tell you that I am honestly standing by my convictions with this. I've actually passed on this book 3 times in just the last couple of months because I felt like the price wasn't where it needed to be or should be, just based upon what I felt like the book was doing. And so I've passed on it. My recommendation is that potentially you pass on it as well. But again, not a whole lot of copies. And so somebody may out there may not listen to the advice, and that's perfectly fine. I put things out there for people to think about. Ultimately, you're going to have to decide what makes the most sense for you. But it's a really cool cover. It's a great cover to see in person. I will tell you that the pink shows all the wear and tear of its age. If you get one that's lower in grade, I have a desire to get a really nice copy of this book. But again, we'll have to wait to see what happens down the line. Okay. So the next book that we're going to look at is on the end of the spectrum, the opposite end. We just looked at a really great Silver Age book, and now we're going to take some time to look at a modern book. We're going to look at a modern book. This is Detective Comics 880. Wonderful, wonderful Jacques cover right here. And with this one, instead of looking at lower grades, we are going to hone in on the 9.8. And you can see here that there are 557 copies of this book on the CGC census, a robust number of sales at 269. The FMV, according to Go Collect, is sitting at $525. So let's go in and click on that and see what the data reveals to us. And what we see is that the most recent sale for this book occurred in July, July 6th. To be specific, and this book sold for $528. And then if we back up, we can see what it went for in January. If I can find it, January, this book was selling for $650, which is basically around $121 delta between the two. So the value of this book has come down. The FMV is sitting at 525. The 1 year is 602. The 90-day is 545, and the 30-day is 519. Now, this book doesn't look bad. I mean, again, the price on this book has come down $121 since the beginning of the year, which is not necessarily bad. But if we are really being honest with ourselves, there is nothing special about this book. Now, I'm saying that as a person that has a copy of this book, have a 9.6 in the collection that I'm very happy with. Wish it were a 9.8, but it came back at a 9.6. This is a really cool cover, but this is also not a key comic. It is a dope cover, and that's essentially all that it is. And so the question becomes, do you want to spend $500 or something like that on a book just because it has a cool cover? And if the answer is yes, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I throw these things out to say that, because there is nothing significant about this book other than its cover, there is the potential, again, that the value of this book could come down, and you could also pick it up later at a much lower price. This book has not given back a whole lot of its gains from the start of the year. If we backtrack a little bit to a year ago, this book was selling for $753. And right now we are at $528, which is, again, it's not bad. But what are you buying? You're essentially buying a book that has a cool cover. So I think I've beaten that horse enough. So we're gonna move on, and we're going to transition over to, in many ways, a classic book. This is a classic book, one that whenever I think about it makes me a little upset because I have it in my collection and I did not get a better grade when I had an opportunity to do so because I was being cheap. But the book we're talking about is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 129, the first appearance of Punisher and also of the Jackal. It is a really, really cool book. Hopefully I blew that up large enough for you guys to be able to see it. We're going to drill down and we're going to look at the 8.0. We're going to look at the 8.0 of this book. There are roughly 1,255 copies of this book on the census, a robust number of sales at 523, and then FMV of $2,800, which is not exactly cheap. But also not terribly expensive either, right? There are roughly 15,000 copies of this book on the census. And when we look at the data, we can see that in July, this book sold for $3,100. And if we back up to January, we can see that the book was selling for $3,332.40. 2 cents. And somehow or another, I continue to get the wrong number whenever I do my calculations for this. I don't know if Go Collect is making some updates, but I'm getting the wrong number on this one. So let me do some quick math here. 0.40 minus, I don't do math in my head very well, so bear with me. So we have a delta of $232, delta of $232, where the value of this book has actually fallen. You can see it play out a little bit over here on the right-hand side, where the 1 year is at 3,100, dropped to 3,035, and then dropped to 2,856. So definitely a decline in this book, but we're still talking about roughly, $230, which is not a ton. That is not a ton of money, especially when you think about some of the other books that have given back a lot of gains. Let's look at the 7.5. There are 1,157 copies on the census, about 472 sales, and an FMV that is very similar to the 8.0. So let's go ahead and drill into this one and see what we see. Let's see if I wrote down the correct numbers on this one. There's a good chance that I somehow did not. This book is going for $28.50. The most recent sale on June 28th is $28.50. And we back up and look at January. January's number is $28.07. And that is a net difference of $43. So the value of the 7.5 has actually gone up from the beginning of the year to June, its most recent sale, to the tune of $43, which is not a whole lot of money. And in some respects, this may just be an anomaly of the data, right? It just could be the fact that there has been no recent sale, which is why it's not also a negative number similar to the 8.0. There is a couple of reasons why this number is positive where the other is negative. We'll see what happens when another copy comes up for sale here in July. But you can see the 1 year average 26.65. The 90-day was up at 3,000, and then it dropped back down to 28.50. And we're going to look at one more grade. We're going to look at one more grade of this book, and then I'm going to give you my assessment of this one. Here is the census count for a 7.0, sitting at about 1,128 and about 376 sales and an FMV of $2,300. And when we look at this one, fingers crossed we have the right numbers. This book was selling, or this book sold for about $2,000 in July. And then we'll back up to January. We have 2419, and I do not have the right numbers. 2419, and we're going to do some quick math here. I think it's relatively straightforward. About, what was that? About, yeah, $420 is the delta between the two. It is given back some of the value. Now, what I will tell you about this book is that this is definitely not a bad book in any way, shape, or form, but I feel like this book is still propped up by everything that happened with Netflix and the belief that Punisher is going to make his debut into the MCU. Just today, we received news that Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are going to reprise their roles in the Echo show on Disney Plus. That was something that was previewed by Geekosity Mag Mikey Sutton predicted this back in 2001, and now we have confirmation that indeed it is going to happen. So those books, I'm guessing the first appearances of Kingpin and Daredevil are going to see increases in value, and I think people believe that the Punisher will also be making his appearance in the MCU. The actor that played him did a phenomenal job, and so I think that, again, this is a book that is being propped up by the expectation of an MCU appearance. And as a result of that, the values of this book have not declined the way that others have. And again, that's part of the reason why I'm saying that this potentially is not a book to pick up right now. Now, to that point, you may have to wait. You may literally have to wait a couple of years before you have an opportunity to pick this book up at a more affordable price. There potentially will also be a run-up of this book where the prices that we are seeing right now may seem low. Because of what potentially could happen. As you guys know, MCU is a huge driver of value. And so we could see the values of these copies increase in the near term before they decline. So you'll have to figure out, is this a book that you want to pick up based upon what your goals are for your collection? What I will tell you is that there are a lot of really amazing books out there that are not seeing that are not going to cost you what this book would cost you. So the question becomes, how do you want to spend your money? And at the end of the day, that is something that you will have to decide. If it were me, I would not pick up ASM issue number 129, unless I was like the biggest Daredevil, biggest Punisher fan of all. But then potentially, if you were, you might already have that book. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to look at one additional example. And this is another just amazing comic, amazing book. It is Incredible Hulk issue number 181, the first full appearance of Wolverine. And like our previous example, there is a lot of speculation that Wolverine is going to make an appearance in the MCU. Like, it's going to happen. And it's a question of who will the actor be and in what form will Wolverine appear. But it is going down arguably the second most popular Marvel character behind my personal favorite, Spider-Man. And so we're going to look at a couple of grades of this one, specifically starting with the 7.0. There are roughly 1,058 copies of this book on the census, with a sale number of sales around 355. And I picked this book because it was somewhat inexpensive, right? I mean, it's $5,000, $4,800 to be exact. I mean, it's expensive, but you want to get the best copy that you could potentially afford. So that's why I kind of sort of looked at the 7.0. So let's go ahead and look at this one, and fingers crossed that I have the numbers correctly. But first, let's pause. Let's look at the numbers. You can see from the chart. You can see from the chart what is happening with this book. No need to necessarily even look at the dollars, right? Because you can see it. But the most recent sale for this book was $7,460. And as we back up down the graph, we can see that in January, this book was selling for $59,1895. That is a net difference of basically $1,500, $1,541.05 to be exact. That has been the increase from January of this year to June of this year. This is the MCU effect, no doubt about it, as is this peak right here. This book in April of 2021 was going for $9,400, which is ridiculous. Over here on the right-hand side, you can see the one-year average at 63. It shot up at the 90-day to 6,700, and then back down to 6,600 right there. But a massive increase on this comic. Let's go ahead and look at one more example. We're going to look at the 6.0 here. There are 726 copies of this book on the census and about 220 sales. The book has an FMV of $4,300 according to Go Collect. Let's go ahead and drill down on this one and see what we see. And you can kind of sort of see a similar pattern here, right? Upward trajectory of this book. Most recent sale was basically $6,000, $5,988 to be exact. When we back up, we go to January. Book sold then for $54.81. That is an increase of $506. This book is on the upward trajectory. Again, the time to have bought this book would have been a couple of years ago, to be completely honest. That would have been the time to pick this up. This book is super hot right now. And again, even though it's a great book, are there other books that you can potentially pick up instead of this one, right? Because what you have to be prepared for is paying potentially a premium above the prices that you're actually seeing, maybe, right? To get the book, only to have the book go up a little bit in value and then potentially come down eventually. So you'll have to ask yourself, do you want to wait or do you want to pick this book up? It's kind of sort of hard. Somebody paid $6,000 for a creamed off-white pages. I just saw that. It was an auction, eBay, cream to off-white pages, when the previous sales for off-white to white were less expensive. Well, not this one. Somebody paid $6,000 for that one, roughly. But this 5100 is definitely not a bad deal right there. Yeah, that looks like the most favorable one in the search results. But anyway, I digress. At the end of the day, you'll have to decide whether these are books that you want to pick up. You know, right now, again, I would say that many of the books that we looked at today have their prices inflated for lots of different reasons, and not in a bad way, right? The MCU effect is a real effect that we have to be aware of, right? And so again, the question becomes, are these books that you want to pick up, or are these ones that you want to avoid? And if you choose to avoid them, where are some other opportunities? The great thing is that I have a video that also looks at books that are having their values tumble as a result of what is happening in the larger economy, and potentially those are great opportunities to pick up some awesome books because their values have come down, unlike the ones that we are seeing right now. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up. What I will ask you to do is that if you are curious as to what my thoughts might be on another book or two, leave those thoughts in the comment section, because potentially I will actually review your book in a future video. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.